All right, we'll call this meeting to order. Good morning, everyone. Welcome, board members and guests, to the Wednesday, August 24th, 2022 meeting of the Placer County Transportation Planning Agency, Placer County Airport Land Use Commission, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, and the Placer County Local Transportation Authority. We welcome the public to in-person participation in addition to remote teleconferencing provided is available to board members and the public pursuant to provisions of Government Code Section 54953E. Due to the COVID-19 State of Emergency Proclamation and recommendation for social distancing, there will be multiple opportunities throughout the meeting for public comment. After I open an item for public comment, those joining us by webinar can signal they wish to speak by clicking the raise hand button in the middle bottom of the Zoom webinar window. If you're joining by telephone, you can press *9 and PCTPA staff will call out individuals one by one who have indicated they wish to speak. For those joining in person, you're welcome to come to the podium. We ask that anyone making public comment state their name and city of residence. You will then have a maximum of 3 minutes to speak, and we'll notify you when your 3 minutes are up. If you're experiencing technical difficulties and are unable to provide public comment during this meeting, please email your comments to solvisable at ssabol@pctpa.net. Because this meeting is conducted via teleconference, all votes will be roll call votes. Board members we will ask that you state your name prior to making a motion and second. For the record, once an item has been moved and seconded, I will ask the clerk for a roll call. Thank you. And Paul, will you lead us in the flag salute?
Yeah.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Baker.
Here.
Broadway.
Here.
Burris.
Here.
Dowden Calvillo. Holmes. Howdeshelt.
Here.
Joyner.
Here.
Jones.
Here.
Thank you. Welcome, Mike.
Sorry, I had a little flat tire this morning.
That's what I hear. Moving on to item C, AB 361, remote teleconferencing.
I think Solvy's going to handle this one.
All right.
AB 361 provides allowances for the board to meet with the relaxed teleconference rules due to the state of emergency and state recommendations for social distancing. The social distancing guidelines have been evaluated, and staff is asking the board adopt findings to allow for the continued teleconference meetings.
Thank you. Any discussion of board members?
Approval of the item?
Second. Dowden Calvillo, second.
Baker.
Aye.
Broadway. Yes. Burris.
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Jones.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Removal of action minutes from June 22nd meeting.
Did I have a special package? I didn't have them in there. Are they there?
It's just a one-pager. You didn't have them, Bruce?
I'll lean over to my colleague from Rockland, since Rockland and Roseville share a border.
Got it. There you go. It's advertised.
I don't know.
Good? Good. Okay.
Howdeshelt seconds, each of Broadway.
You did.
Baker.
Aye.
Broadway. Yes. Burris.
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo. Holmes. Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Jones. Motion passes.
Perfect. Agenda review, is there anything that we need to,
No changes.
no changes? Perfect. Now move on to public comment. Is there anybody in the public that wishes to comment on something not on our agenda? Seeing none, we'll bring it back. And, oh, you got one? Okay.
Peter Eklund, you're free to speak.
Thank you very much. My comment was prompted by the RFP for a strategic outreach consultant. I'm going to read a short statement. It may go over a little bit, but I hope you bear with me. It's like I really have a hard time shortening it. For public transit, the proposed transportation sales tax expenditure plan will include $100 million for dial-a-ride and commuter services, not $1 for fixed route services, which carry the highest percentage of transit trips. This fiscal year, PCTPA will spend $300,000 or more for a joint countywide short-range transit plan. It should have a caveat in the goals objectives section, warning the county and cities that count on any major transit operating assistance over the next 15 years beyond what is available from LTF and STA funds, even if a transportation sales tax measure passes. Operators will have to increase reliance on dial-a-ride that, compared to fixed route transit, has significantly less riders per revenue hour and a significantly higher subsidy per rider. Background information on the current RFP for a strategic outreach consultant to assist PCTPA in building support for the coming sales tax measure states specifically the current expenditure plan was confirmed with 14 workshops in May 2021, which of course was right at the height of the pandemic. The conclusion reached then was that a larger focus on transit beyond what was in the expenditure plan is not supported by these workshops or polling data. Is PCTPA willing to ignore major trip generators on the horizon, including 2 universities in Roseville, a 100-bed hospital in Rockland, in addition, major residential and commercial expansion exceeding past growth estimates? Has it considered or even looked at transit statistics just before and after the pandemic? Consider them. For Placer County Transit, commuter rides dropped 88%. This is before versus after, not during. Dial-a-ride dropped 51%, and fixed route transit only 37%. In 2018-2019, local fixed routes carried 64% of all one-way transit trips. That percentage is now 84%. I'm asking you to re-examine the decision to exclude fixed route service from any future sales tax measure, and that you instruct the strategic outreach consultant to re-examine current feelings about transit as a whole system that interact with each other. And each of them is important in its own right. I will provide additional information on this subject at a later date. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Any other public comment? Perfect. Seeing none, we'll move on to our consent calendar for Placer County Transportation Planning Agency. These items are expected to be routine and non-controversial. They will be acted upon by the board at one time without discussion. Any board member, staff, or interested citizen may request an item be removed from consent for discussion. Anybody on the board have anything that needs to be removed?
I have none.
Anyone in the public? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, Director Holmes, move approval.
Second, Dowden Calvio, second.
Thank you.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes.
Dowden Calvio.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt. Joyner.
Yes.
Jones. Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to the consent calendar for Placer County Airport Land Use Commission. Any board discussion there?
I have none.
Anyone from the public wish to speak on this item? Seeing none, we'll bring,
Moves approval. I'll second.
Baker.
aye.
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Dowden Calvio.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Jones. Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on, we have a scheduled 9 a.m. public hearing for Placer County beekeeping code amendments, consistency determination. David.
Good morning. So we're asking the commission today to conduct a public hearing. Plug in the mic. We're asking you to conduct a public hearing this morning regarding a proposed Placer County's beekeeping code amendments, and at the conclusion of the public hearing, that we're recommending that you find that the proposed beekeeping code amendments are consistent with the airport land use compatibility plan. I do have a brief PowerPoint that summarizes the material in the staff report. Excuse me. So you all have seen this slide many times, but for the viewing public, the role of the Airport Land Use Commission is to adopt an airport land use compatibility plan. And secondly, it's to review changes to various community general plans, specific plans, planning documents, zoning regulations, building regulations within airport influence areas. Generally, an airport influence area is approximately 2 miles surrounding an airport. I would like to point out today for the members of the public that the commission does not approve zoning regulations, does not approve general plan amendments. Its purpose is to, tongue-tied, determine consistency with those regulations in the airport land use compatibility plan. So the commission today will have 3 choices in terms of making findings. You would find the beekeeping code amendments consistent with the Airport Land Use Commission or Airport Land Use Compatibility Plan, consistent subject to conditions, or you would find it inconsistent based upon specific conflicts. So why are we here? We are here because the Agricultural Commissioner is requesting the Placer County planning staff to update the county code to provide specific standards regarding acceptable beekeeping practices, as well as enforcement mechanisms. My understanding is from the county staff that they've also received input with respect to allowing beekeeping as part of backyard gardening. And currently, beekeeping is a practice that is not allowed in single-family residential zoning. And there is single-family residential zoning within the airport influence area. So the county has submitted the beekeeping code amendments to us to determine consistency, and as required by state law, we have to review the zoning text amendments to determine consistency. So what exactly is being proposed here? The staff report has an attachment, attachment 1, that lays out the proposed beekeeping code amendments, and I believe there's an attachment 2 that summarizes in plain English what exactly is being proposed. I put that together because I thought that it would be helpful. So, zoning text amendments. So basically, the county is proposing to allow no more than 2 beehives on parcels less than 20,000 square feet in the residential single-family zone. They're limiting the number of beehives in other zoning districts to 5 per acre with a cap of no more than 100 hives on parcels larger than 20 acres. And the zoning text amendment will provide the agricultural commissioner discretion to withdraw approval of beekeeping if it's declared a public nuisance. And within the zoning text amendments, there is provisions that links the public nuisance part of the zoning code so that the agricultural commissioner can make those determinations. Secondly, as part of the code amendments, there's what's called Chapter 6, the animal amendments. It's known as the Animal Control Law, and this will require beekeepers to register and provide property owners written permission in order to operate an apiary. And this applies to the beekeepers except for hobbyists. And it also sets requirements in terms of providing adequate water supply, establishing hive separation and setbacks between properties, and limits the quantities as well as identifies transportation requirements for beekeepers. So we reviewed this, and the beekeeping falls under the agricultural land use category within the airport land use compatibility plan. And agricultural land uses are yellow in the plan. There are various columns with different colors, and yellow is considered conditional. And in this instance, and that's because agricultural uses have the potential to attract hazardous wildlife, which impact airport operational safety. The most prominent wildlife hazards are birds, and which is why we always are looking at wetlands and any sort of land use that can promote bird activity. The other most common wildlife hazard is deer. Deer in planes, just like deer in automobiles, don't mix. And so as part of looking into beekeeping, I'm a member of the Airport Land Use Cooperative Research Board. That's part of the Transportation Research Board, and so I can make use of their research capabilities. And beekeeping has not been identified as an issue by the Department of Agriculture as well as the FAA. And in fact, and the staff report identifies that there are several airports that have established beekeeping programs as part of their land management practices. And actually, a lot of this came about because of an incident that occurred at Pittsburgh Airport many, many years ago, where bees were crossing, the property and landed on planes and basically stalled air traffic control until the bees were removed. And so beekeeping practices were put in place at that airport, and ultimately there was a program established with the FAA to allow that at other airports. So I guess the bottom line here is that because airports have established beekeeping programs, beekeeping is not considered a problem for airport operational safety.
When you say, I just want to interrupt quickly. Are you saying that they have beekeeping actually on the airport site? Not here, but in those other instances? They actually
yes.
establish the beekeeping procedures for beekeeping on site?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. I'm sorry. Sometimes I go too fast. I figured that people.
I just want to make sure it wasn't like adjacent to it, so.
No, they're on airports, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And and in fact, the FAA has initiated a program to allow this to be standard practice amongst airports. So in that regard, when we look at consistency, we are supposed to look at 4 factors: noise, and there are no noise impacts associated with airports versus beekeeping practices that I have found in the research. There's safety, and safety does not apply to, I'm allergic to bees. It applies to the impact of an aircraft accident to people on the ground, as well as to an impact to people that are passengers of the aircraft. If the aircraft hit a tall building. Then there's also airspace protection, and that deals with building height around airports. And then there's overflight compatibility, which is basically a state procedure that requires notification to residents within the 2-mile airport influence area that you live near an airport and you may experience noise and there may be safety issues. So when you look at those 4 factors and the fact that beekeeping practices are currently an allowed activity on airports, and airports are promoting it as part of their sustainable programs, we basically have come to the recommendation that there's no modifications to any land use, there's no impact to airport land use compatibility, no impact to safety, height, and noise policies with the compatibility plan. And so we're recommending that you find the beekeeping code amendments consistent with the airport land use compatibility plan. And with that, unless there are any questions, I recommend you conduct a public hearing, you make your consistency determination, and then we move on to the next agenda item.
Perfect. Any questions?
So let's talk about safety, and maybe the Ag Commissioner can address this. Safety is only the interface between the activity and the operations. I'm sorry, is safety limited to flight operations?
Safety is looked at in terms of density when you're looking at residential uses, or intensity if you're looking at non-residential uses. So the number of people on the ground. So as you're closer into an airport, you want to limit the number of people on the ground during the time of day, because the potential for an aircraft accident is greater the closer you are into an airport because of the landings and takeoffs. And so you want to limit the number of people, because if you limit the number of people, you limit the number of fatalities as part of a potential accident. Likewise, when you look at safety, you also look at safety with respect to the person and or the persons within the plane. Because if you build a large building at the end of a runway, that can cause an impact also to those occupants of the plane. So that's how safety is looked at.
Great. And this would apply to all airports in Placer County?
Yes.
And safety does not extend to food safety?
I'm sorry, I missed that.
Does not extend to food safety. In other words, if there's a beekeeping operation nearby and that airport has a perishable good that may be impacted by the beekeeping operation, is that
No,
our determination doesn't extend into that area?
no.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other board members? Trinity, you have anything?
I do not, thank you.
All right, we'll open the public hearing, have public comment. Do we have anybody that wishes to speak on this item? Perfect. So we will close the public hearing.
Move
and
staff recommendation.
Entertain a motion. So we have a motion.
I'll second it.
Second.
With a small smile on my face. I flew for many, many years. Bees were never, ever on our radar. So this is clearly an aviation-related use, and so I have no issue with it.
I'm just wondering if the bees have to file a flight plan.
No,
They do not.
just don't know. They're local traffic. So they're
So we have a motion and a second.
Baker,
Aye.
Broadway,
Yes.
Burris,
Yes,
Dowden Calvillo,
Aye.
Holmes, Howdeshelt,
Yes.
Joyner,
Yes.
Jones. Motion passes.
Perfect, thank you. Moving on to item J, Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, Sierra College MOU for the implementation of Fairness Student Transit Pass and Transit Network Company Ride Subsidy Pilot Program. Mike, that was quite the title.
It is. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, members of the board. Mike Costa, Senior Transportation Planner. I'm pleased to bring this item before all of you today. It has been in development since 2018 and even actually prior to that. But the item before you today does consist of a memorandum of understanding to approve, to allow the Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency to fund this pilot program. The pilot program was identified as a need by Sierra College a while back ago in order to mitigate some of their future development impacts on their campuses, as well as to provide transportation access to their programs for many of their students. In addition, the program recognizes that there are several transit agencies that currently serve their multiple campuses across Placer and Nevada County. So this program actually capitalizes upon that existing opportunity. And lastly, while the discussions did start back in 2018, of course, the COVID pandemic did put a little bit of a halt on these discussions, as that was significantly a disruptor towards the transit operators and to the on-campus attendance for Sierra College. However, discussions for this program resumed back in the fall of 2021, and now we're here today to bring forward this MOU. What the pilot program actually consists of is two components. The first component of the pilot program is a fare free access component for all enrolled students at Sierra College would have access to the public transit operators that are participating in this program for any purposes and any ride throughout their enrollment. So that could be to or from the campus, or it could be to or from anywhere else in Placer or Nevada counties, as long as the students are actively enrolled and show their student college ID when they board on the participating transit agency buses. Those participating transit agencies are, of course, in Placer County, Auburn Transit, Roseville Transit, and Placer County Transit. However, we also have Nevada County Connects in Nevada County that is participating in this program as well. The Tahoe Truckee Area Regional Transit, or TART as many of you know it by, is already free to all passengers. So that program is essentially participating as well in terms of helping promote public transportation to Sierra College up in Tahoe Truckee area. But it is already free, so they did not have to actually actively participate in this program other than promote that transportation option that students already have up in Tahoe Truckee. The second component of the program is the Transportation Network Company, or TNC, ride subsidy component. And that component essentially is a partnership that the Sierra College would have with, say, an Uber or Lyft service, which is one of the TNCs, or they are a couple of the TNCs eligible. And that ride subsidy would be provided to Sierra College students that are traveling to or from a Sierra College campus in the evening hours when public transit services are not available. It is important to quantify that to or from a Sierra College campus versus the fare-free program, which is anywhere. This TNC component is a qualifier that it has to be a trip to or from a Sierra College campus, and it's only in the evening hours. And that's to not compete with the existing public transit services that are provided throughout the day. I forgot to mention earlier that the fare-free pilot program is actually live as of Monday, August 22nd. However, this TNC ride subsidy partnership has not yet been established, but we are hoping to implement it this fall with Sierra College. The major component of the reimbursement, I would say the financial structure of this pilot program, is that Sierra College reimburses for the fare-free transit program, since those operators are essentially losing transit fares by offering these free rides. Sierra College is actually reimbursing all of the participating transit operators for half of their fare revenues lost for all the students that board, or all the trips that are offered on the participating transit agencies. And then for the TNC ride component, if that discount ride is, say, $5, the college would provide that payment to a TNC company for every ride offered with that subsidy. And then this program, essentially as a 3-year pilot, would operate through June of 2025. What the Memorandum of Understanding before you establishes is a funding mechanism by which PCTPA, through our Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency, can reimburse Sierra College for some of these costs associated with the pilot program. It is important to note that the costs that the CTSA is reimbursing are for Placer County rides only, not for Nevada County. That is handled separately through the college. And since the college has the direct partnerships with the transit operators and with the TNC companies, the CTSA through this MOU is directly reimbursing Sierra College and not any of the agencies or the TNC providers. The CTSA through the MOU would be paying up to half of the costs that the college are paying for both programs. So for instance, for the transit fare reimbursement, if the college is paying for 50% of the transit operators' lost fare revenues, we are reimbursing them for half of that for Placer County transit operators. So essentially, we're reimbursing up to about 25% of the fares lost for Placer County transit providers. For the TNC component, if the college is reimbursing, say, a $5 discount on every TNC ride provided in Placer County, we would reimburse half of that, so $2.50 for every ride provided on a TNC provider. And then either party through this MOU can terminate the agreement with a 60-day notice. However, even with a termination, that agreement is in effect and the pilot program would operate through at least the fiscal year so that it wouldn't disrupt student services or the academic calendar year. And then lastly, there are, of course, provisions and clauses within the agreement that mutually indemnify both our parties from any sort of operating issues, as well as establish clear communication protocols and other administrative procedures in order for us to effectuate the MOU. In terms of estimated pilot program costs, some of you may recall back in June of this year, the CTSA budget was approved with one of the line items that contained a funding mechanism for this MOU. We committed up to $200,000 in our annual budget for supporting this program. That is part of the estimated $450,000 to $475,000 cost for this program. Those costs were actually established and estimated based on pre-COVID ridership numbers. So even though we are in a post-COVID world that has significantly disrupted our I would say, travel demand patterns for transit operators as well as Sierra College, we think that this higher estimate or this pre-COVID estimate gives us a good buffer for estimating some of the program costs associated with this program. And I've broken out kind of the estimated share of those costs and how they're distributed among the participating transit operators, Sierra College, and the CTSA. We're all paying for a portion of this program. We've all also mutually agreed to market the program and jointly administer the program. And one of the things that's also contained in the MOU is that all of us, and I mean this from PCTPA level to the partnering transit agencies in Sierra College, will be conducting joint surveys on the transit operators as well as through the college to survey participants or student participants to understand their satisfaction and use with this program throughout its pilot, as well as to help us with potentially future transit planning service needs. So if we identify areas that maybe aren't served that students are requesting service to, that could help us in future planning efforts. So this program is meant to be fluid. It's also, as a pilot, meant to help us understand the nature and travel patterns of our Sierra College students throughout Placer and Nevada counties. And with that, of course, staff is recommending approval of this MOU between the CTSA and Sierra College for the reimbursement and implementation of this program. And just to give you a little bit of background, the program, as I mentioned earlier, at least the Fare-Free program did launch on August 22nd or Monday. We have conducted some marketing already for this launch effort where we've identified the college has actually hosted and prepared a centralized web page that everyone, the operators, PCTPA, and anyone that we're releasing this information to can direct people to for more information about the program. So it's a one-stop shop, so to speak, for how this program operates and any frequently asked questions or informations. We even have links to all of the transit operators' services and kind of an overview of all their services provided to the various campuses. So it is a good resource for people to use and refer to, as well as we've released information both to the media as well as to internal to Sierra College. All enrolled students did receive notification about this program. And from what I understand, there are already students actively, happily participating in the program as of Monday. So this is a live program, and this MOU would allow us, of course, to support it financially. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question. Thank you very much for your presentation. So I understand that of the approximate $450,000 to $475,000, $200,000 is coming from WPCTSA and $200,000 is coming from Sierra College. So then you're estimating that the participating transit operators are going to be responsible for that $50,000 to $75,000. I think I heard you say you broke that down via jurisdiction, but I didn't see that in the documentation.
So the 50 to 75,000 is actually just it's kind of a rough global estimate of all the collective fares lost by the transit operators. I don't believe I did break down per operator. It all really depends on the ridership, and I will have to say again, the post-COVID world has changed some of that. And so these estimates are based on pre-COVID numbers, based on a study that was done in 2018. We're hopeful that this estimate gives us kind of a buffer room to where this is hopefully the highest costs. And if the program is very successful, then we will of course reevaluate and look at funding strategies if we need to provide additional funding, or if we need to come back to you and say, hey, this is actually being more implemented than we expected, and here's some additional needs that we might have to continue the program.
Oh, yeah, I was able to talk with our transit expert with the city of Auburn, and we don't actually have a direct route to Sierra College, but we could obviously have an impact with the free rides for all. So we're looking at approximately $500 to $600 for us. So so I'm assuming that the bulk of that will translate to Western, Placer, and to Roseville, so.
That's correct. I think the county actually shares the highest portion of that cost, and then Roseville, and then Auburn Transit.
Okay, great.
And then Nevada has a small portion, but that's not actually reflected in that number. That's separate.
Okay, thank you very much.
One of the fundamental aspects of this program is it's a pay-as-you-go program. Some of the other transit pass programs with other community colleges and other jurisdictions set a defined amount that will be reimbursed. This is where we will actually track actual rides and we will pay for those actual rides as opposed to setting a set amount.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any other board members? All right. Anybody in the public have any public comment about this?
One other item of this is that the Sierra College Board has approved this MOU, so.
Perfect.
I do have a comment related, I guess. I think about, for example, we have this issue of the bus shortage. Placer Unified School District, for example, the high schools, I don't think there's any busing to any of our high schools in Placer County now. And so I wonder if there's been any thought of a potential pilot program for something like that, or?
So, yeah, of late, we have experienced some districts reducing or eliminating bus service. I wouldn't say the entire county is.
No, and I apologize. It's just Placer Unified High School District. So the high schools impacted are Auburn, would be Placer, Del Oro, and Colfax High School. So Roseville has its own.
And Director Burris could probably confirm Colfax has also recently eliminated their bus.
Yeah, it's
Yes, that's correct.
It's the 3 high schools in the Placer Unified High School District. And so I know that the high school district has funds available for transit. It's my understanding that they had to cut their bus service because there weren't drivers available. So I think maybe we'll see how this goes, but there might be an opportunity to expand or at least discuss something where the school district is paying that. Like Sierra College is partnering, so, and I don't know if this is going to be an ongoing thing with Placer Unified High School District, or if it's just this year because the drivers are, but anyway, just kind of putting it out on the table. I don't want that to get caught up in this. I think this is a great program and I want to move forward, but I just kind of wanted to put that out there as something to potentially think about possibly. So.
Mr. Chairman, I recommend approval of a memorandum of understanding between Western Placer Consolidated Transportation Services Agency and Sierra College Joint Community College District for the implementation and reimbursement of a fareless student transit pass in Transportation Network Company Ride Subsidy Pilot Program as presented by staff.
Thank you. Second. We have a motion and a second.
Baker.
Aye.
Broadway.
Yes.
Burris.
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo.
Aye.
Holmes.
Yes.
Howdeshelt.
Yes.
Joyner.
Yes.
Jones. Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to item K, congestion mitigation, air quality, and surface transportation block grant funding guidelines, funding estimate, and call for projects for fiscal years 26 and 27. Rick?
Good morning, Chair and Board. So the item before you, what we were looking for, the recommendations are to approve the program guidelines for the 2022 funding round for STBG and CMAQ funds, to approve the funding levels for the fiscal year 26 and 27 round for funding, and then to release a call for projects. In terms of background, as you're all aware, PCTPA program CMAQ and STBG funds for projects in Placer County on a 2 to 3 year cycle. This is a 2-year cycle. It's corresponding with SACOG's 2-year cycle, and it's also getting us under a June 2023 deadline we have for changes caused by FHWA. With each cycle, we adopt guidelines and fund estimates. FHWA and the state have various codes that kind of control how we do this process. If you recall from a prior presentation, FHWA did an audit statewide and identified some non-compliant processes across the state. And so they advised Caltrans of that, told Caltrans to work with all their individual agencies and make sure everyone was in compliance with the current regulations. Kind of going through that process, it has led us to update our guidelines and our evaluation process in response to that. Next slide, please. So kind of going over what's changed from prior rounds in our guidelines, we had basically two changes to make because of the federal requirements. One is doing a better job of documenting and demonstrating that we are making performance-based decisions in terms of selecting projects. So in order to better document that and to show that, we have revised our guidelines to better define our performance metrics and the ranking criteria. We've also created a 5-page, basically fillable PDF application to improve that documentation. So we've kind of made it very clear for the applicants, here's the data that we need from you, and that'll allow us to make those performance evaluation documentation easier and not a large burden for our applicants. The second change is a fairly technical one. Prior practice, PCTPA board selected the projects, and then SACOG staff administratively put those into the program. Under the FHWA regulations, the MPO has to take specific action to select the projects. So the SACOG board has to vote to fund the projects that we end up selecting. So as part of those discussions with SACOG, they asked to put a SACOG staff member on our evaluation team so that they had confidence that we were following the regulations. Although new to us, that's something that they have been doing for many, many cycles with the El Dorado County Transportation Commission. And so we did speak with them, and they confirmed they've been doing that for many cycles. It's gone smoothly. They said they thought it actually added value to their process. So that is a change we made on the evaluation team. And then, as I noted, the PCTPA board will vote to select those projects. Then that list will go to SACOG, and the SACOG board will have to take specific action to vote on those as well. The last change that we made to the guidelines was just kind of some transparency and some clarity. We wanted to document the process for amending funding on projects. It's not uncommon that we fund a project specific dollar amounts, and then as the project goes through the process and things change, sometimes those dollar amounts go up or go down. So we've kind of identified the process for that. I think the notable items in there, if there are existing projects within the CMAQ and STBG funding round and fund dollars are moving between projects, those will come back to the PCTPA board, most likely on a consent item. So there's documented that the board approved the change. That's something we've done in the past. I think the important change that we're documenting is because SACOG has to vote to select a project, if there's a desire to move perhaps excess funds to a new project that's not already funded, besides going to the PCTPA board, that would have to go back to the SACOG board because SACOG has not previously selected that project for funding. So that was an important item to document in the guidelines. In terms of funding levels, we go through a 3-step process. We estimate the future revenue based on the state's estimate of the county share. Take the county share, we sort of project that out a few years because they don't give us future revenue assumptions. We use those numbers. The second step is that we do a true up from prior rounds. Because we're dealing with estimates, there can be differences between our estimate and the actuals, so we need to make corrections for that. The third step is that we identify any discretionary or off-the-top expenses for either regional programs or for projects. Typically, we fund Spare the Air program, congestion management program, and freeway service patrol. I'll talk about the 3 of those in a few minutes, a little more detail. We also occasionally fund regional projects, kind of larger projects or regional significance. This particular round, we had no requests from any of our agencies, so we don't have any recommendations for regional projects with this round. So we do the math there. That gives us kind of a balance of funds after taking dollars off the top that we use basically for the kind of the application-based process. Next slide, thanks. In terms of funding levels for the CMAQ program for fiscal years 26 and 27, you're going to see across the top we have the correction for the 2020 to 2022 estimate. When that round was originally done, the assumption was we would see 14.8 million. The actual revenue came in at about 11.9, and so we over-programmed about 2.9 million. So we do need to make that correction this round. For the fiscal years 23 to 25, I think you're all aware of the IIJA, kind of federal act that has put more money into the program. Looking at the data that we have available, we felt comfortable adding an additional 1.1 million into the program based on the estimates that we've seen. And then for years 26 and 27, the total for that's about 4.4 million per year, so 8.8 for those, leading to roughly a $7 million total. In terms of discretionary, kind of off the top, from the CMAQ program, we're looking for pull money for two programs. One is the Spare the Air program. That is a 6-county program run by the Sac Metro Air Quality Management District. It's something that has been traditionally funded by PCTPA. I will note that PCTPA, as well as the Placer County AQMD, we've been talking about potentially making some improvements to that program to take a little bit of a broader approach. The Spare the Air tends to be, kind of hear the Spare the Air message only on the worst days. We're going to explore expanding that a little bit to see if we can get something that's a little broader, a little more kind of promotion of transit year-round in terms of as an alternate. So that's something kind of in the works. The congestion management program, that is basically it's PCTPA staff efforts. So that's staff time that ends up in our OWP, and that is staff efforts that support bike, rail, and public outreach to support basically any kind of mode other than single occupancy vehicle traffic. So with those kind of off the top numbers, what we end up with is the 6.67 million available for basically what I'm referring to as application-based programming. For the STBG program, very similar. The STBG funds come in sort of two different types. There's urban funds and rural funds. So we have corrections for the urban funds. For 2020 to 2022, the correction is kind of a mere 169,000. For the 2023 to 2025 time period, we're treating this a little bit different than the CMAQ funds. We expect additional STBG funding from IIJA. However, the state has a bit of discretion in how they dice up those dollars. Some of those funds go to the bridge program and they go some other areas, and we have no information from the state on what they're doing. So we didn't feel comfortable at this time assuming any changes because we just don't know what they're going to do. So we left that as is with the old estimates. So table shows our 26 and 27 estimates for the urban and rural portions at about 7.5 and 2.3 million, giving us the 9.6. In terms of discretionary funding, we have in here the Freeway Service Patrol. The change here is historically we've funded Freeway Service Patrol out of the CMAQ program, but the CMAQ program has a time limit on how long you can fund a program like Freeway Service Patrol, and we've reached that. We've reached the end of that. We can no longer fund it out of CMAQ funds, but it is eligible at STBG, and so we're proposing to continue to fund Freeway Service Patrol, kind of as the current program exists out of STBG. So with that, we end up with about 9 million available for the application-based process. in terms of the schedule, if you approve this today, we'll do a release of call for projects on Monday. The applications will be due on October 21st. During that period, we will be meeting with the cities and county, the town, to talk about their projects, help them kind of strategize between STBG and CMAC and get a better sense of what they are looking for. We'll go through the evaluation process, should complete that in December, kind of put out a notice to the agencies of what our staff recommendations are so they're aware of those. Any further conversations if necessary. Bring the recommendations to this board back in January, and then in February and March, it would go to the SACOG Transportation Committee for a recommendation, and then the board for adoption, likely in March. So our recommendations were to adopt the program guidelines, adopt the funding estimates for 26 and 27, and then direct the staff to do a call for projects. We'll note that this whole process went through, we had a working group with the town, cities, and counties updating the guidelines, going through the fund estimate. It also went through the tax. We have concurrence from everyone on that. And with that, I would be happy to answer any questions you may have on all the items.
Any questions of board members?
Yes, thank you.
Broadway?
Yes, thank you, Brian. So when you speak to discretionary funds, are those then not subject to review? Those are simply available. So Freeway Service Patrol as an example, those funds will be available. They're not subject to review by SACOG?
SACOG still has to vote those. They have to vote everything. So they still have to vote that. But from a rather technical standpoint, for the STBG funds, we make performance-based decisions. We're not required to do sort of a competitive, scored, you got more points than somebody else process. We just have to be able to show how we selected process. So that does allow us to take things like Freeway Service Patrol off the top.
So, of course, the concern being, do we have someone make a decision that they don't see value in the program where we do, and then subject to removal or restriction of those funds?
There is the technical risk that SACOG would do something different. We're not anticipating that. In all of our discussions with SACOG management, they expect to take our list and have it approved. But I think, as you know, dealing with any board, the board will make the decision the board will make.
Right.
But we expect the full support of SACOG executive management on adopting our list as provided.
Okay. And then with the change in the process, do we see this creating any delays for the projects to be approved and shovel moving forward and shovels hitting the ground?
No, because the funding is, for the most part, it's in the 26 and 27 fiscal years. So we have a long time to get this sort of approved and through the process. So we don't expect any delays.
But we all know that they can occur, so.
They can occur, but I think this process, we don't expect to
You don't think
delay
this
the
will add to the process?
Correct.
Okay, perfect, great, thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
I may note, sort of on a just a bigger sort of global picture. These are the program guidelines for the 2022 funding round. Director Lucan and I are still working with Caltrans and FHWA on what happens after June of 2023. We're getting some positive feedback, and we think that what's proposed here is there's a good chance that that's what will happen after 2023. So hopefully what you see here is what goes on in the future, but just kind of as full disclosure, it may change between this round and next round as much as this is a major change. There is some potential for something different to have to occur in the future.
Great. Thank you, Rick.
Mr.
Perfect.
Chairman, I wanted to ask about the 2.9 million. Can you walk us through that again? It was anticipated there would be 14.8 million in revenue, but there was only 11.6, and so we programmed in anticipation
Yeah, so
that a pandemic wouldn't happen, or Right.
Exactly, yeah, so, you know, again, we're in 2022 when we're programming in 2026, so the same thing when, back in, I don't know if it was 2015 or 2017.
Okay.
They
So we
programmed
were-
that round several years in advance. They're making assumptions on revenue,
That's-
and the reality was there was less revenue.
And the minute you tell me, the minute you provide the answer to this question, I'll go, sure, yeah, I remember that email. Where does the revenue come from this? It's proportion, but where does the revenue come from?
This comes out of state, basically, or federal gas tax. Federal gas tax comes from the feds. It flows to the state, and they have there's regulations, formula. CMAQ is very formula-driven. The STBG is less so. The state has some discretion where they don't with CMAQ.
Okay. And then last question, the discretionary funding under CMAQ, is that our share of the pie, or is that the whole pie? The
This-
200,000, is that PCTPA's
Yeah, so
portion?
when you look at the number above, that's the 6.9 million. That's our estimate of revenue for Placer County. And we are, in this scenario, we're electing to take 200,000 and fund the Spare the Air program with it, which would go to SAC Metro.
I saw it in an email somewhere.
Not a problem.
Just didn't remember it.
Anybody, any other questions on this side? Trinity, do you have anything?
I do not. Thank you.
All right, we'll open it up to public comment. Is there anybody in the public, both on the internet or in person, that would like to speak?
One moment.
Are we ready for a motion, Mr. Chairman?
Not
I think
quite yet.
she's-
Oh, sorry.
She's-
We do have somebody that's out there.
Yes, we do.
Let's see. I guess he unraised his hand, so I
Okay.
think we're good.
Oh,
I'll
well.
entertain a motion.
All right,
Okay.
I'll,
Oh,
Oh, am I on? Can you hear me?
yep.
Oh, okay.
You're on, Peter. You're free to speak.
Okay, I have a very quick comment to make. In the latest federal transportation bill, they've allowed transportation demand management programs to be eligible for a lot of funds. And that's a program that would be very helpful, to the county. Basically, what it means is it's ways to get people out of their cars into transit, and anyway, it can be very effective with a small amount of money. And a lot of it can be mitigations for developments in terms not just for infrastructure, but also for paying money to help transit. I think it would be very useful for PCTPA to actually hire a person, for a pilot period, whose primary job was transportation demand management. And really what you have to do is look up and see which of these programs make such funding available for such a program. I'm sure it's one of them. I'm not sure, but there was a big push throughout the country to allow that type of program to be included. So I'm just asking PCTPA to look into that and see whether it makes sense as an overall way to try to get people off the road and into alternative modes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
No.
Seeing none, I'll bring it back
Yes.
for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I'll move the adoption of the revised CMAQ and STBG funding program guidelines for fiscal years 2026 and 2027. Also, that we adopt the funding estimates for the CMAQ and the STBG programs for fiscal years 26 and 27. And finally, to direct staff to issue a call for projects based on the adopted guidelines and funding estimates.
Broadway will second the motion. I'm sorry, I will defer.
Jones will second. Thank you.
We have a motion and a second.
Baker?
Aye.
Broadway? Yes. Burris?
Yes.
Dowden Calvillo?
Aye.
Holmes? Howdeshelt?
Aye.
Joyner?
Yes.
Jones? Motion passes.
Thank you. Executive Director's Report. Director Lucan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things to report on this morning. Probably the first and most important is that we have been able to fill a position that was vacated with the departure of Aaron Hoyt, who, as you know, received a great promotion to be the Deputy Director of the Nevada County Transportation Commission. And so we conducted a recruitment for an associate/senior planner position. And we were able to hire Corey Peterson, who's in the audience today, and he'll come up in a second. But Corey comes to us from the consulting firm TJKM, and he also, prior to that, worked for one of our partners in our funding strategy and related legislation, the Solano Transportation Authority. And so, it gives me pleasure to introduce Corey to the board. And Corey, if you want to maybe come up and say a couple words.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and look forward to working with you all. They've been getting me up to speed on all the great things that you guys are doing. It's been drinking from a fire hose the last day or so, but I'm sure I'll get up to speed. And like I said, I'm excited to be here up in Placer and working with you all. So. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Welcome, board.
So with that, I'm happy to report that we are fully staffed with our 7 FTEs for the agency. However, we have a little thing going on here with my retirement, as we announced at the last board meeting, and so just wanted to report that recruitment, I would say, is going well. As of 5 o'clock yesterday, we have 23 applicants.
How many?
23.
23, thank you.
Now, of those 23, as with most public sector recruitments, they don't all qualify for that. So I would say maybe about a third of them qualify for the position. And so we're very hopeful that the selection committee that the board appointed at the last meeting will have they will conduct a paper cut, if you will, review on September 13th. On September 21st, we'll have the first interviews of about 5 applicants with the selection committee. And then at the meeting on the 28th, we will actually have tentatively the top 2 candidates for you to interview and for the whole board to interview and make a decision. We through Solvay, have worked with the board to identify likely an extended board meeting that could last up till about 2 p.m. On September 28th, and we've checked with everybody's calendars, and it seems to work for everyone, but just a reminder of that process. The last couple things I wanted to report on is you probably heard a little bit about this, but we joined forces with SACOG and the El Dorado Transportation Commission to apply for a RAISE grant. It's a new federal discretionary grant program. And the grant that we applied for, and happy to report we received, was a $5 million grant to fund what are called mobility zones and clean transit for the region. And so the point of this project is to study the needs of the region in terms of these mobility zones and clean transit, which is part of the next generation transit process that SACOG adopted last year. But our hope is that a majority of those $5 million in funding would be available for jurisdictions in the Sacramento region to conduct pre-development type of activities. So for example, if a bike trail was identified as a priority for a specific jurisdiction, one of the difficulties we run into many times is it takes money to get that project ready for a grant program like the ATP program. So our hope is that this $5 million, a portion of this, will be the first part of a seed program to help with those pre-development costs. Again, a very, very important activity that many of our jurisdictions, we've burned through the shovel-ready, if you will, project. So we have a lot of projects that aren't shovel-ready, and hopefully this will be the beginning of helping with those pre-development funds. So we're happy to report that the region got that grant. The last thing, and this relates to the Transit Pass program, earlier, we had planned a press conference with Sierra College for yesterday, but unfortunately due to the cyber attack on Sierra College, we decided to, with Sierra College, to postpone that press conference. And we're trying to reschedule that press conference for either the 13th or the 27th of this month to really, again, kind of get the word out about this program. And directors Broadway and Houdeschelt, who have been very active in the Transit Pass program, would be participating and possibly speaking at that press conference. But it is open for the entire board if you would like to attend, and we'll certainly let you know when that press conference is finalized, the time for that. So with that, that's all I have to report this morning.
Thank you. Alrighty, any board direction to staff or any questions of Director Lucan?
One thing, thank you again, Mike, for the presentation on the MOU. What I would ask, Mike, is if we could include for the board a report back on utilization. So we'll have more than a month's time frame prior to our next meeting. So if you could bring back to the board some detail on the utilization, I think that would be beneficial for us.
We will do that not only at the next board meeting if we have that data by then, but moving forward, we'd be happy to present data periodically to you to show how that pilot program is going. So.
Great. Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Any other board direction of staff? We have some informational items, and we will call this adjourned.